Hello and welcome back to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. I am your host, Todd Cave, and today I've got a great guest for you. He's a fellow online fitness trainer like myself, and he's also multi-talented because he just wrote a really good book called The Inner Game of Fat Loss: Mastering Your Mind for Lasting Weight Loss. So as you can see, I have the book here. It's a great read. And if you are new to this podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. If you would like to support this podcast, please visit the link in the bio of this podcast for our merch store with the brand Taught Me. I have on one of the shirts today, as you can see. And if you are on a spiritual journey and you just started and you want some help to remove some fears and traumas, please hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 and it can help you to get some magic mushrooms.
When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster and then learn how to control it.
You got to be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why it is really hard to really crack the matrix because there's so many levels and layers to it, you know? So without further ado, Adrian, welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. How are you today, my friend?
Fantastic, brother. Thank you for that intro, and I'm glad to be here and chat it up. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'm honored to really have a conversation with you on camera because we have a lot of conversations, behind the scenes about what we do in our businesses and stuff. And I was really impressed with this book. It's a short book, but it's really good and succinct. And I wanted to have a chat with you today to, talk a little bit, about yourself, your journey, and how you got into fitness, and then how you end up getting to write this amazing book. So share a little bit about yourself and what led you to write this book.
Oh man, I'm glad we have a little bit of time. So yeah, thanks, man. I was thinking about that earlier today, just about how kind of an interesting journey it's been. So um I'm gonna try to give you a short version, though it probably won't be that short because it kind of started when I was, still a very young child, and I often share this with people that, and to me, it wasn't like a huge deal until I finally realized at some point somebody was like, "That's not common." I'm like, "Oh, I guess you're right." But um, I remember growing up when I was about 6 or 7 years old. I think that was the first time I really got exposed to like religion. It was my cousins actually. They were Seventh-day Adventists, and they were pretty devout, or at least the family was. But my cousins who were younger were kind of like still trying to figure things out, and I got exposed to that for the first time, and it really kind of made an impression on me. And I remember once I left, because I was living in LA at the time. I left there to go back home, which is from El Paso, Texas, where I'm from, and I was living with my grandmother. And one day I was going to go to bed, or I had woken up from a dream or something like that. But I remember just becoming encapsulated in like what I can only call the fear of God. And I knew at that point, like, I need to go to church. Like, I need to do something about this. Like, I need to get closer to the divine. And at that point, all I knew was Seventh-day Adventist. So I remember waking up, and like I got up from the bed and I went to my grandmother and I was like, "Grandma, I need to go to church," right? So I went in the phone book. At the time, we didn't have beautiful Google just quite yet, and I flipped through the phone book and I found whatever I could find with Seventh Adventist. I found a church, and grandmother started taking me there. Uh, pretty much every like Saturday for like a year. And sometimes she would stay with me, sometimes she wouldn't, but for the longest time, like I kind of went by myself. And that was like my introduction really to the spiritual path, which in my mind would lead me directly to the path on fitness. And during that time with grandmother is when I actually first started putting on a lot of weight, because she would spoil the Jesus out of me and make all the great yummy Mexican food and steak and all that great stuff. And I remember that was probably the first time I like ballooned up, because I was really like a kind of skinny kid. And at that point, it was the first time I really kind of got overweight. And that happened throughout my life. I would like balloon up and then I would like lose it. And I kind of seesawed like that up until about early college. And long story short, that's kind of when things got worse. Like I had always had some kind of spiritual journey, but at that point things got really hard for me. I had moved away from home to go to college, and I was I started kind of experimenting with other substances, but mainly alcohol was like the one that I struggled with the most, and kind of use it as a unhealthy coping mechanism. And that combined with just not taking care of myself and getting busy and trying to feel better of the struggles in life, like I ended up gaining a significant amount of weight. I think I was over 200 pounds, and I'm only like 5'6", 5'7" on a good day. So that's when like things were really challenging, and I knew like I need to absolutely do something about this. So long story short, that was kind of the deep end of my physical, like I'm in shambles. And throughout that process, I turned to fitness. I turned to a lot more other things as far as like religion goes and spirituality and all that kind of stuff. And within a period of about a year of jumping straight in, I was able to lose over 70 pounds. And not just that, but my entire life like really transformed. And that really gave me a passion for not only just, fitness, but also just self-growth and, self-improvement in general, and helping other people. Because right off the bat, people started asking me about like, hey man, you look great. What are you doing? And I wasn't ready at that point, because I was still getting myself under control. But shortly after that, I was like, man, this is fantastic. I fell in love with the transformation journey. I decided I want to help others and started doing the coaching thing. And then I always wanted to write a book, never really quite knew what I wanted to have the first one be about. But as I was working with clients and looking at a lot of the problems, I realized a lot of it started in here. And that's something that I had always talked about and had never really put together in a way. So, again, very fast version, but all that ultimately led me to writing this book and putting it out there to help people realize that, as you're very well aware, that fat loss isn't just about the body, right? We're trifold beings, body, mind, and soul. And in my approach now, I really believe that you have to utilize all three to not only lose the weight, but to keep it off and to really level up who you are in general. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. So I know that in my case, when I became really fat and I went through my own journey as well, I had a moment where I will never forget the day the penny dropped for me. And I was like, okay, I actually have to get myself in shape. Did you have like a moment like that where you can remember specifically the day or the event or the particular thing that made the switch in your head where it was like, I gotta pick myself up. I gotta get into shape. I gotta get rid of this belly fat. Did you have a moment like that?
Yeah, I think I had several. However, for me, again, I mean, it's hard for me to remove my overall transformation or separate it from just losing fat. So in my specific journey, I was addicted to alcohol. So that was like a huge deal, and it directly contributed to my weight gain. And I remember the minute that I first realized I had a problem, I was actually sitting on my desk and on my computer, and I remember just leaning back in my chair, and all of a sudden I was like, uh-oh, like I can't stop, and I don't know what to do about this. And but I remember very clearly that was the first time I had that reckoning that, hey man, you need to do something about yourself or you're gonna end up 6 feet under. And then through and around that time, I remember probably the first time I couldn't fit into my like fat pants, and I had to close that button, and it was like not closing, so I had to get like a rubber band just to like be able to wear my pants. And I had like no clothes, nothing fit anymore, and that was just like maddening. And then there was one time where I remember I was at Stanford. I was living at the Bay Area at the time, and I was broke as a joke, and I decided to basically donate my brain to science in a way. So they were having a study, and they didn't tell you exactly what it was, but they did tell you that you would be getting electrical shocks. They would pay you like a couple $100 after you did it. So I needed money. I signed up for the study, and I remember I walked over to Stanford, and as I was going towards the room for the study, I passed this other room, and it was like an old school scale. And I got curious, so I stepped on the scale, and that was the first time I ever saw it go past 200 pounds. And that my brain could not get, like it could not compute. It was like, what is happening? And that was another pivotal moment where I was like, all right, dude, like you need to do something about this. And yeah, and I'd love to say that all these moments were, or that one of these moments was just like the one that made me move forward and lose the weight, but it wasn't exactly like that.
That's interesting because for me, mine was that particular moment. Like I would never forget. I had just had my surgery. Well, let me say I had my surgery 10 months prior, and it was bending over to tie my shoes. So obviously I had on my jeans and everything. And when I bent over, because I was sitting on the bed and I bent over to tie my shoes, I got short of breath and I couldn't breathe because my belly was that big. And that was the moment that it was like, nah, dude, you got to get back to training, because I used to train prior. I was very disciplined, but because after I had my surgery, you get into bad habits, you get a little bit depressed, you start having all these negative self-thoughts and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you gradually let go of yourself, you don't realize how big you actually get. And that moment for me was like, I will never forget it, because I was getting ready to go to the hospital for physiotherapy. And it was like, nah, And that same day, I asked the physio, can I start back training? And he says, just be careful because you can't put a lot of weight on your foot, but structurally you can. But obviously, because of I didn't use my foot for a long time, he basically was like, okay, step by step. And that's when we started to really like step up the physio and stuff all on the same day. I was like, wow, that's amazing. So how did you actually like get into coaching? Because like for me, my experience is completely different. Mine was like the voice, you're going to do coaching. But how did you actually get into it? Were there like several events, or there was this one thing that was like pushed you into coaching?
So yeah, that's a great question. And just to comment real quick on what you were saying, that's awesome that you had that moment where it was just kind of like it clicked and you were able to move forward and get back into shape. Because I find that in the fitness journey and in the healing journey, that it doesn't always work that way. Like some people have that moment where it's just like, okay, cool, snap up your fingers, you're either healed or you're on the path to improve. And with other people, such as yours truly, it's a grind. It takes constant work, constant ups and downs. Like you're moving forward, you're moving backwards, and that's really what it was for me in regards to that. So but I think also the fact that you had, 'cause you said you were training before that, right? Like you had
Yeah.
already.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
already into it like on a high level.
Yeah, see, so I was never really that dude. Like I actually hated very much to work out. I couldn't run more than like a couple miles until I turned like 27. I was just, that exercise was not really my thing. So I had to, and to this day, like I've had to learn to love it. There's parts of me that still doesn't enjoy it. But a part of me now really appreciates the whole journey. And because I realized also what it's done for me. I mean, I was just thinking about that yesterday. It's like, man, like I owe fitness so much because not only did it get me physically in shape and healthier, but it's taught me patience, perseverance, hard work, discipline, all these other traits that come along the journey that have really allowed me to thrive in other areas of my life. So that being said, to answer your question, as I was kind of finally getting back on track with life, I started to lose the weight. I started to really exercise and develop all these, habits and stuff. And I got into peak physical condition at the time, at least as far as where I had been. And, I got down to single digit body fat, and just I saw my abs for the first time, which it was like, that's always been like a lifelong goal of mine since I was like little. I remember I had this Batman toy, and he had just like the most ripped out. I don't know if you remember all those, like, the
Yeah,
Marvel
yeah, yeah,
toys
yeah.
and stuff. So I had one of those guys. I remember I was always like, man, like I wish I looked like that, or I had that. And somewhere along the line too, like I remember I had this vision of myself, like I was sitting and meditating, and I had my shirt off, and I just had like a chiseled core. And I remember I always like remember that, and I was like, yeah, when is that gonna happen? But it was funny because one day I like opened my eyes, and that image came back to me, and I was actually wearing like the same pants, and I had my shirt off, and at that point I already had a six pack, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. I never thought I'd get here. I digress though. So in that journey, I ended up working at a 10 company, Fortune 100 company in the Bay Area. And I loved my job. I was good at it. I got to travel. I was getting paid extremely well, and was doing the whole routine while I was working this corporate job. I was a crazy guy. I was literally thought I was a guy that would show up with his blender at work, and I had it on my desk. And and I would take a bag full of groceries and my meal prep and put it in the like community fridge. And I'd get there at like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'd make a protein smoothie with all these veggies and stuff, like at work, right? And of course,
Awesome.
nobody else in the company did that. Like I was like just this outlier. I would train during lunch. Like I set up my calendar to make sure everything was blocked off. I would tell all my managers and people like, hey, I work out during lunch. And the days that I wouldn't work out during lunchtime, I would get there at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning if I absolutely had to move it because we had like an important meeting or whatever. And I would train super early. And on the rare occasion, I train after work, but usually that wasn't the case. And I mean, I just really figured out, I went all in. Like I knew this is my goal. I never want to go back to being where I was. And that was my life. And things were generally good, but I kept on feeling this feeling of like listlessness, like just something was missing. It wasn't, I felt kind of like a number. I mean, I was not really helping people in a direct way. And I just knew that I had to do something else. And I wasn't sure what, but I really felt called to leave that job. And without really having a plan, man, I ended up, I was in Amsterdam when it happened. And I remember the day I went on a tour. It was like an Anne Frank tour or something like that. And there was an older couple. It was this gentleman and his wife, and he was about 60 or 70. He was a retired corporate lawyer. He had like 10 daughters, and he was loaded. But I was talking to him and his wife on the tour, and I remember just looking at them and realizing like, man, they looked so tired. And it kind of just hit me. I was like, wow, like I don't want to wait until I'm old to travel the world and enjoy life and like thrive. Like that needs to be happening now, like while I'm still young and I have energy. And I just knew that's not me. Like I can't work this corporate job and end up just paying a salary, getting a salary and 401k and then retiring. So it was after that, I remember I went back to the office without even getting back to the States. I called my manager and I basically gave him my notice, and I quit. And I took that next year and I started traveling, and that's when I started figuring out like what I wanted to do. And I was kind of debating different things, and ultimately, just because of my own personal journey and speaking to people and the way the universe was kind of pointing, that coaching opportunity opened up. And yeah, once I kind of moved forward with that, I mean, there was no looking back. So I think it was just kind of orchestrated that way. But
You
I'm
know,
curious. I want to know how you got there.
it's mad because what I realized is that people that make like these dramatic changes in their life, they either do it without a plan or the universe forces them into it, which I am in the latter. Because for me, I never wanted to be a coach. I never wanted to do what I am doing now. And in fact, I resisted, even this podcast, I resisted to do for 2.5 years. I literally refused. And in my case, I had surgery on my foot 7.5 years ago. Similar to you, I had a really good job. I was a civil engineer, traveling, making decent money, having loads of fun, really enjoying life. And my life came to a halt, boom, just like that, overnight with the surgery. And things progressively got worse for me in all manners of fashions, mentally, spiritually, economically, physically, emotionally, psychologically. It was like I felt like I was being under attack all the time. And how I actually got into coaching was basically because I had, because you and I are in the same course for online fitness training. When I joined, it was actually to do another business. It wasn't to do fitness at all. So fitness was nowhere on my radar. But I was in the airport in Chile, and anyone that listens to me, my show, or hear me on other podcasts, know I always call it The Voice. And The Voice spoke to me, and The Voice said, you're going to do coaching. And I deliberated with myself for like 4 hours. And The Voice kept saying, you're going to do it. And, you know what I mean? I decided, okay, well, there's nothing else to do. And because I was forced, and everything in my life for me, because I'm a very stubborn guy, and I openly admit that, what the universe does is it makes things extremely difficult for me until I am forced to submit. So I was forced to submit to actually become a coach, and I still fought it. And then now I just have let it go. Even like with me, again, to start this show, 2.5 years I was deliberating whether to do it. And about 2 months ago, The Voice woke me out of my sleep and said 2 words: do podcasts. And now podcasting is a part of who I am and what I do, because I can help people on the physical side with fitness and diet and exercise. And then on the information part, because I talk a lot about our ancient history and our past, and then also on the spiritual side, where I link all of those 3 together. So podcasting has become part of me. But again, the universe made things, or I should even say the universe, I made things so difficult for myself because I need to take accountability, and just didn't listen until it got to a point where it was so bad. Because remember, you see how in the beginning where I said I just flipped and I just decided, okay, I'm going to do fitness. That's me with doing things like this, but it gets to a stage where it's like I just surrender, and that's what happened to me. So I wish I would listen a little bit more, but no, I'm doing my best to do that to avoid the pain, because I give myself a lot of pain,
I mean, you and me both, brother. And I think that's something interesting, because it's something I've been having. So I don't know if it's going to be it'll probably be a second book, but it's something that I'm incorporating into a new program that I'm doing with coaching. And again, it's more merging these 2 paths, because I'm starting to realize how the spiritual path and the fitness path there's a lot of similarities. And with again, you're saying like it's like you don't listen. You have to be forced into making positive change. And I think that's a big reason of why we are here as humans, is we have this natural spirit of rebellion, right? Like we want our way. It's ego, right? And what I was talking to somebody about the other day was, it's really cool when you're working with a coach, it's like a microcosm of the relationship with the creator, because when you're working with the coach, you have to submit to that person's guidance, submit to that person's in a way, authority, and say, okay, I trust you. You're going to tell me what to do, and I'm going to follow suit. And some people are good with that. A lot of people aren't. But in a way, it's kind of like practice, because that's kind of how it is, I think, with the universe, right? God, or whatever you want to call it, is like, here's what I want you to do. And we're over here being like, no, but I want to do my own thing. So, yeah, it's kind of neat.
Facts. Like Lao Tzu said, pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice.
Optional, yeah.
You know what I mean? And that has been the story of my entire life. So, as a coach, right? What do you see where you are talking to potential clients or talking with clients? What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you see with regards to what people think you is to achieve fitness goals and diet and fitness altogether? What are some of the biggest misconceptions you see? Because I know I see certain ones, but what do you see on your side?
There's a lot. But I think that something I wish somebody would have told me is that it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows, you know? What I find often happens is people have good intentions and they desire to make positive change, obviously, but they're never really prepared for the hurdles and the setbacks and the struggles and the difficulty along the way, right? I love that Mike Tyson quote. He says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, you know? So it's like in your
True.
idea, it's like, oh, cool. I want to get on this workout plan. I'm going to start eating right. I'm going to lose all this weight. I'm going to become this freaking champion. And then, 2 weeks into it, when they're having to eat a meal that's not pizza or hamburgers or cheesecake, and they have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be at the gym by 5 because it's the only time they have to train. It's like, oh, this is terrible. Right. And I think that's why it becomes important to have that, again, the mindset, that mental shift of how you go about thinking about everything and how you're going to reframe that. Because if you can do that, then it makes the entire journey a lot easier. But really what happens, and that I find is again, it's like 80-90% mental. And unfortunately, most people are stuck having the same repetitive negative thoughts on a regular basis, and they talk themselves out of achieving and accomplishing the things that they want to accomplish. And there's a lot of limiting beliefs, and compiled with that, there's a lot of lack of emotional regulation and control. And that's ultimately what sets people back from getting fit, losing weight, and getting to be where they want to be, right? I mean, the workouts themselves and even the eating, I mean, those are obviously a big part of it, but it's not really what keeps people from succeeding. It's their inability to be consistent with that, which again usually has to do with the mindset and the emotional control.
Yeah, I totally concur because I have found in my own journey, and I became present to it very recently, that is exactly what it is. 80% is the mental part of the game, and the 20% is the doing. And what I was doing was the 80% doing and 20% mindset. And that works up to a certain point. But what I'm realizing is that because, like, I was a civil engineer, and it's a very demanding job. And because it is results driven, your mindset is all about the doing. So it's about getting in early, working late, working hard, doing. But because I guess because construction is more very structural, so there's an order of a sequence to follow. There, logistics involved. It's very logical. But what tends to happen then now is that where you have to make choices in life, if you're stuck in just the doing, you're going to be thinking of everything as just to do, but not realizing that your state of mind affects your ability to make choices. And the choices that you make are what determine the outcomes in your life. So I have been very much now of a point where I work on my mental game way more than the actual doing, because one of my mentors said that working hard is good, but if you're not working smart, you're overworking yourself. So the idea is to work hard and smart, but you have to have the mental game to have exactly how to be able to make the right choices. And then the effort, because you've thought it out properly, is just 20%. And that's been a game changer for me, because I apply that in fitness, where you eat well 80% of the time and 20% you can actually like eat those pizzas and what's not. But I didn't realize that that's applicable to life as well, where it is 80% mental and then 20% doing. And we've been conditioned to just want to work hard, but instead of working smart and hard, you know?
Yeah. And I find a lot of the time too, it's not, it's just, sometimes you got to, touch the hot stove. And in some cases is before we get smart, we have to hit the wall first. Right. And we have to figure things out the hard way. At least that's how it's been for me a lot of the times, is that, there's times where, I probably could figure this out in a much more intelligent way, but I also realize that if I don't move forward and do something, then it probably will keep me from getting there at all. So I'm going to just have to go down this path in order to get some momentum going, and then eventually I get there. But you're right, we can do things to increase our chances, or at least give us a better leg up on what we're going to do, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, because what I tell my clients is that I say to them, look, the better you feel, the better choices you make. The better choices you make, the better your life becomes. The better your life becomes, then you feed back into the choices you make, which are based on perception, which comes from information received. So you're creating this feedback loop by working on the mental aspect first, which then transfers into the physical, and then the physical transfers back into the mental. So you're creating this feedback loop, right? And I wish I had understood this, wow, many years ago. I would have saved myself a whole heap of pain. But I guess through my pain is reason why I'm here now, and I'm able to share these stories with others, so that maybe I can help them shortcut that process, But your book here, really good book, is called The Inner Game of Fat Loss. So what was the inspiration for the title for the book, Because to write a book, I want to write a book, but like, what was like, okay, how did you come up with this book?
So the honest answer is it was a bit of a challenge with me and my buddy. My buddy had wanted to get into writing books, and he went out and purchased his whole course and was going to go ahead and do it. And he kind of asked me if I wanted to join him on that path. And I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to write a book, so why not? And that kind of became the fire to get it done, right? And I was like, cool, now I have an excuse to do something that I've always said I wanted to do. I literally have like a reminders list pop up on my phone every so often of my goals that I want to accomplish, and one of those was write a book. So being able to check that off was great, but now I'm like revising this one and want to write a new one. But that honestly, to be 100% honest, is how this really came into materialization. And that also very much speaks to the power of accountability, which is, again, a great reason to work with a coach or have a friend or somebody that will kind of, make sure you're going to get things done. But really, when I was trying to figure out like what I was going to write it about, I mean, this was just something that has always been near and dear to my heart, because it was things that, again, like I never knew or wish somebody would have told me. So I kind of went back and was looking through a lot of my notes and thinking about the things that really helped me, and was trying to think of what I could give somebody in paper form that would really help them. And like I said, just because of the years of working with clients and helping them lose weight, I realized like, man, it's a lot of it's mindset, and people aren't really realizing it, and having these constant conversations and just hearing like limiting beliefs as they were, being put out into the universe, and just what that was doing to that person, and seeing them stuck in this negative feedback loop, as you were discussing earlier, but going the opposite direction. Right. So I was like, okay, cool. How can I give them something, not only, because the thing is, there's a lot of material out there, there's a lot of books and stuff, and they might be entertaining or rewarding for the mind as far as like concepts or things to read and entertain, but there's not a lot, or at least I struggled finding a lot of things that gave you really practical, actionable steps that you can take. So that was also part of my goal. It's like, let's try to systemize this in a way too, where you can not only understand what's happening, realize where you're going wrong, but do something actively to get that into balance to actually propel you forward. And that's kind of where that came from.
Interesting. Yeah, that's the thing. I find that once you're based in trying to give back, you always end up getting the ideas, because it is all about how can others understand this. So you have to break things down, because you do a really good job on breaking down a lot of things that we're talking about in this book. And one of the things, you go into great detail about setting transformative goals. So can you explain the difference between just normal goals and setting transformative goals?
Yeah, I forget the quote, right? But it's like a goal without a plan is just a wish, or something to that extent. But first of all, if any of you listening to this get this book, or if you want to get a hold of me on Instagram or whatever, Sleeping Giants Fitness is the name of my company. I'm actually going to be putting together probably a free mini course on just this one chapter. And I already have a workbook out there that I can send. But in my opinion, this is probably, if you're going to do one thing from this book, outside of the meditation protocol, which is arguably just as important, if not more important, but this is a great thing to do and to start. And like I said, if you only do one thing, I would probably say this is it. And when you set a goal, I mean, regular goals, everyone has them and they're great. But again, if they have no power, if they have no real driving mechanism or force to get done, a lot of times they go by the wayside. So having a transformative, emotionally charged goals is a whole different ball game, because again, you're involving different areas of your psyche, and tying that emotion to that goal is what really it's a game changer. Basically, it creates the fuel that drives somebody forward to have something be a nice to have to something that's a must have. And that emotion, again, it ties in the components of who you are, right? It becomes not only a physical thing, but it becomes an emotional thing, it becomes a mental thing. And like, literally, I mean, it's really fascinating as humans. I mean, you know this, Todd, but we're the only mammals on the planet that can literally sit there and simply think a few thoughts and cause physiological responses to happen into our body. So if, for example, if you sat there and started thinking about all the BS that's happening in your life, or that you're stressed out financially, or whatever thing you want to think about, all of a sudden you might find yourself feeling a pit in your stomach, or anxiety, or you might start sweating, or you might start feeling your heart race. So it's that emotion will literally change what's happening in your body, and also create that feedback loop that can also affect your thoughts. So I'm sure many of you listening have been there, where you get into this negative state, and it might start with a simple thought, and then it's causing all these feelings in your body. And then you notice the feelings in your body, which just make things worse. And you start freaking out because you're feeling some kind of way. And then it makes you think other more negative thoughts. And then all of a sudden you're just worked up into this crazy place of, just fear and anxiety and frustration and all these things. So the beautiful thing is that it works the same way in reverse. When you can focus in on the positive thoughts and create those positive emotions, and even more so the negative emotions, because you can basically create some kind of alchemy where you're taking all those negative emotions, or the fear, or all the anxiety of what's going to happen to you if you don't change where you are currently. Then you can take all that and say, okay, cool, let's use this to our advantage and put this in a way where now I'm driven emotionally and mentally and physically towards getting something done. So I have a whole process about how you can set goals. And like I said, a lot of it too is SMART goals is a thing, making sure that they're specific, that they're attainable, that you have measurable ways to accomplish them, that there's a deadline and all that great stuff. And that's definitely important. A lot of people start there. And I find that that's more common of a thing within the self-help, community, and even with fitness. But again, I think the missing link is not only having that first part, but then going deeper and asking the true whys, right? So maybe a practical example is going to be, and I'm sure you come across this a lot, Todd, is like, somebody might come up to you and say, hey, like I'm going on a trip to Ibiza, like, in like 3 months, and I want to look shredded because I want to, go to the clubs and be on the beach, whatever. And it's like, okay, cool. So you literally have a driving force to look your best while you're out on a beautiful party island. But I often find that that's usually not enough. I mean, it's literally a pretty surface level, physical, superficial goal. But if you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you you need to lose 30 pounds or you're not going to get to see your daughter walk down the aisle, like, I mean, even me just saying that, feel the weight of the difference of how those two things feel, right? That's a huge difference. That's a massive difference. So here's the thing. If you think about it that way, it's like, in all reality, I mean, if I just told you, okay, you have, party guy on one side and you have the guy that's going to walk his daughter down the aisle on the other side, who do you think is going to actually accomplish their goals? And in reality, we have no idea. I mean, you would want to say it's going to be the guy that's going to walk the daughter down the aisle, but we'll just, for the benefit of the doubt, say they both accomplish it. But here's the difference: is, at least from what I've seen, and in my opinion, though they might both accomplish their goals, I can almost guarantee you that at least the person who was going to walk his daughter down the aisle has a much greater chance of keeping that for the longer term than the guy who only did it for the superficial reasons, right? And I think that's one of the key differences. And also things that you asked me earlier, you asked me about what you find people struggle with or make mistakes on. And I think that's really the difference, is like, people tend to miss the fact that you don't just want to get to your goal, whether that be your physique or anything else in life. Like, it's not about that end point. The real magic, the separating factor, in my opinion, is getting to that place and then keeping that, right? And that's the difference. And if you look at the data, I mean, it's pretty crazy. And The Biggest Loser talks about this all the time. But when people are going through fat loss specifically, I mean, it's something ridiculous. And I don't have the exact stats, but I think it's something like 97% of the people who end up losing significant weight gain it all back within like a 3-year period. Wow. That means only 3% of people are keeping it off, right? And again, I mean, that's very, for some people read that stat. I mean, when I first read that stat, I was like, wow, that's incredible. I felt very fortunate because it made me realize I was, one of the very small percentage of people that was able to, I've kept the 70 pounds off. It's been over 10 years now. And I didn't realize that that's basically an anomaly. So when I started to think about, and again, in my opinion, like, I think that's the separator. Those 3%, like, they have a much bigger goal, purpose, why behind why they want to lose the weight and accomplish it than just the average person who wants to lose weight for a wedding or a trip or whatever reason.
What you're describing is something that I learned as a civil engineer. Is called root cause analysis. And it was a course that I went on. And basically, to summarize the course, basically, when you come out of it, you ask why 5 times. And they call it the 5 whys. And when you ask why 5 times, you actually are able to get to the root cause of the problem. And in this case, you be getting to the root cause, or the root as to why the person actually wants to do it. Because I find that if a person does not have a big enough why, they will fail. They will give up.
Yeah.
Like, I've had people that have paid me in full to train with me and then disappeared. Literally just disappeared. And it's like, you made the first step, which is the most important step, to be honest. And then it's like, after, it's like the self-sabotage kicks in, and it's like, it just got real. Like, actually, I have to do this thing. I just paid this guy to help me to get into shape, which means I have to do it now. And the self-sabotage is like, no, I just run away. Oh no, I have a guy that became my client last month, and he's disappeared. He would not reply to any messages at all. And I while I can't judge, I just always find it very difficult because I always thought that when you pay people for something, it incentivizes you to it. But I guess the fear of change might be bigger than the fear of the loss of money. It's a really strange one for me sometimes.
Yeah, I mean it it's happened to me too. It's happened to me uh not a lot, but a handful of times where it's the same situation. You know, somebody will sign up, they pay in full for a program, and then they kind of just disappear. And it could be for all sorts of reasons, though. But I think that's why these goals and setting goals in this way is important, because a lot of people don't ever really truly think about or consider like why they really want to do it. You know, even if they feel the emotion of like, oh man, maybe I'm scared because I don't want to have all these complications. Like when you get deeper and realize what that means, you know, you start to unearth things that maybe you didn't want to see or consider. And sometimes I think the fear of, you know, of seeing what those things are can cause you to like not respond to somebody. But that kind of just goes to show you though that how powerful negative emotions and negative thoughts can be, because it's like, oh man, even though I just invested in doing this thing that's supposed to help me, now I can't carry through because I'm so paralyzed by all this junk that's been festering for years.
Yeah, it's I have seen it over the years. I mean, it doesn't happen a lot, but I see it every year.
Mm,
And it's a strange phenomenon that I just don't understand because I mean, you pay in full for something, and then, dude, sometimes within a couple of days, people start replying to me. And in this situation, it took like 3 weeks. And I just like, but I try my best to say, hey, like whatever's going on, just let me know, right? Like you can delay, you don't have to start now. At least let's have a conversation. But I find that fear is a very, very powerful emotion. It can have both a positive and a negative effect where, excuse me, in the positive, where you can be like, okay, like you said, I don't want to go back to where it was. You know what I mean? That guy. And
hmm.
that fear of going back there drives you forward to put more distance between that guy and the guy that you are now. So every time you look back, you're like, I'm not going to be that guy. It kind of pushes you forward. So in some regards, fear can be very powerful for positive. But on the negative side, you could end up getting caught up looking back so much that you turn back to be that guy. So, but then I guess it reinforces the same point that you were making about mindset, right? So it all
Yep.
depends on the mindset as well.
Yeah, and the thing with that is, and I can speak to this because this was me. Is you know, and Tony Robbins has a great quote on this, which I always mess up, but I'm going to try to get it right this time. So it's people don't change until the pain of change is greater than the change. Oh, see, I already messed it up. Basically saying that the pain that we experience in having a change needs to be greater than the fear of change itself. I think that's how it goes, right?
Yeah, I
And
understand. Yeah.
and for me, that was true. And another way to spin that, and what I was trying to get to, is people get very comfortable to their discomfort, right? So because it becomes familiar, it might become the only thing you know, and at some point you begin to identify with that. So if I'm not this overweight alcoholic, like who am I? If I'm going to live life in a way that is counter to the way that I've been living for years now, then who is Adrian? That's the only thing I've known, and that's scary to go into the unknown, to go into this new paradigm that I've never or haven't experienced in a very long time. And it's way easier just staying where I am because at least I know. So the other quote is like, better the devil you know than the one you don't, right? And I find that is often a place where many people find themselves, and which is, it goes back again to your saying through the mindset, because having clarity on even identifying that, I think, is very crucial. Like if you can at least make that jump between like, okay, well, I realize that I'm struggling because I'm afraid to change. Now you can at least address and attack the problem. but I think most people don't even realize that that's the case. That's how it was for me. Like, I didn't recognize it until much later that, oh my gosh, like I'm just used to this. Like, I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, it's just become my normality. So when I was thinking about a life, even if it was a life that I dreamed of or wanted, because it was so foreign, it like thwarted me. Right. So, but again, I think that's kind of where it goes all back to, you know, and again, the mindset and what I talk about in the book is the awareness. And that's where something like, for example, meditation is huge and can come into play.
Yeah, I concur. And so, we talked a little bit about the transformative goals and just normal goals. So how have you seen that having a deadline makes a difference in achieving your goals than not? Because, what I mean? Like, some people argue, well, a goal is a goal, right? What difference does it make if I set a deadline or not, right? Because, like, I'm going to achieve it anyway. So how do you counter that argument where people say that it doesn't make a difference?
It depends on the person and it depends on the goal. I literally just had, before we even spoke today, which is really funny, was having this conversation with another colleague about the importance of having those deadlines. And in the fat loss space specifically, it's a little tricky. And this is why, right? Because people tend to get too caught up on the end date. And what I see sometimes happens is, again, this could work two ways. You have a date set and that propels you forward because now you have pressure. You have a time factor that allows you to understand, okay, I need to get to work because if I don't start doing these things, then as time passes, I'm not going to get there. And that drives you forward. But if you don't have that date, then your mind kind of just doesn't have a container and it just kind of is like, oh yeah, I'll just keep moving forward. It doesn't make it as crucial as real. But what sometimes can happen is maybe you get to that date, and if you don't get to that goal, people sometimes get really disappointed and really disheartened, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, I did all these things and I followed as best as I could, and now it's my imaginary date that I set for myself, and I'm not where I want to be. This is terrible. And then they get kind of really disheartened. So it's really tricky. And again, I think that goes back to how you flip it, that mindset in general. And I think having the realistic goals and, more importantly, focus in on all the wins that happen besides getting to a number, because as you and I both know, I've worked with people that have lost 10 pounds. Say we have person A and person B. One loses 10 pounds, the other loses 10 pounds. You look at person A, maybe there's not much of a visual change. You look at person B and they look like a completely different person, right? Because in that case, there's a significant amount of fat loss or a significant amount of increased muscle mass. And, the number on the scale is just one data point that is kind of arbitrary and arguably not as important as some of the other things to look at, such as your overall health and wellness, how you're feeling, your energy levels, your strength increases, the amount of muscle you put on, the way you look, the way you feel, all that great stuff. But that being said, I think for the general person or public, having that time, date, or timeline is crucial because it allows you to more systematically create an action plan. So it's like, okay, cool. If I have to get to, if I want to lose 12 pounds and I'm giving myself 12 weeks, then I know I have to lose a pound a week. And now you have actual data to contribute and look to see that you're on track. But if you just say, I want to lose 12 pounds, but you don't really have a deadline, then maybe a month or two passes, you're like, oh, I've lost 6 pounds. It's like, okay, well, that's good. I mean, obviously you lost some weight, but in comparison to what? And is that a good rate for you? Like, is it a part of what you're trying to accomplish? Are you still going to be able to take certain steps to get there? It just makes it a lot more quantifiable and real. And like I said, for me, the biggest help in having a set deadline is to apply that realistic pressure, at least in my experience, because, even with business goals and things like that, I don't like to feel rushed, and sometimes I don't like the pressure, but I realize that if I don't set a deadline or a date, then I'll definitely take a lot longer time. And there's a phenomenon, I forget the name, I think I mentioned in the book, but basically that time expands or contracts depending on, what your situation is. So for example, if you give yourself a month to clean your room, it's going to take you a month to clean your room. But if your landlord came and said, hey, Todd, I need you to get out of here by like tomorrow, you're going to find a way, to clean that your room in 24 hours, right? So same kind of
Facts.
principle.
Mhm. Yeah, and you know what I thought was interesting you said as well is that when you have an end date or end goal, it allows you to work backwards because then you can actually create a realistic plan. Because what may happen is that in working backwards, you may realize, hold on a minute, it actually is not possible. So then it can give you the ability to say, okay, well, it may not be possible in 3 months, but maybe 4 months. So that way, you don't put yourself under unrealistic pressure. And then you can actually have something that not necessarily is comfortable, but realistic. Because I think the main thing that people lose sight of is this goal realistic? Right? It may sound fanciful, but is it realistic? Can it be done? And if it can be done and you have the plan, then it's something that you can put a lot of effort in that you have a good rate of success. So
Yeah.
you mentioned something in the book which I thought was quite interesting, and you said that you mentioned about the importance of not sharing your goals with everyone. So why do you think it's important to keep your goals quiet?
um, so from like a neurological standpoint, every time you tell somebody or express what you're trying to accomplish and you receive any kind of positive feedback, you're getting like a dopamine hit. You're basically already experiencing that reward like if you already accomplished it. So that's kind of how that works. And to give you a very kind of straightforward answer. So, the idea is if you don't share that and you don't get that immediate reward, you can actually, because that in and of itself might keep you from moving forward and taking action because you've already received a payout, right? So that's kind of the suggestion. But the other thing with that is it's really hard to do that. I don't know. I'm curious to see what your experience is with that. But if you ever had like a really ambitious goal and you don't tell anybody and you just work in silence without anybody really knowing what's happening, it's really challenging. But it also becomes very powerful in a way because that's just not the way the world operates. Typically things like this are more spoken about or exposed, or you have a team or multiple people working on things. But and I didn't write this in the book, but as I'm speaking now, I'm kind of seeing it as like ultimately the path you walk, though you will have others that will help you in along the way, but it's your path. You're walking this alone. And when you leave this planet, you're probably not leaving with somebody else at the same time. You're going out alone. And when it comes to the transformative journey, especially something like fat loss, I think that's one of those things where you can grow an incredible amount from being able to execute in silence, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And I look at it from a completely different side because and I guess maybe it's because of I was born in Barbados, and my mother always used to say to me you don't share your goals and dreams with a lot of people, right? Maybe, like a very select few, but you don't be telling everybody because she says you don't know who is bad-minded that is going to wish ill upon you so that you don't actually achieve it. Because now as an adult, what is palpable to me is that negative energy from other people can affect you in your goals, whatever that may be. So by keeping it close to your chest and not telling many people, one, you don't have that pressure of expectation to achieve that to that person because it's an internal thing. And two, you get to reduce the amount of quotation marks haters that would want to stop you from getting your goal because, dude, this energy thing is real and is not something that you can see, touch, and taste, but you can feel it. it is akin to like the wind. You can't see the wind, but you can feel it and you can see its destruction if you have like a hurricane. But because you can't see it doesn't mean that it's not real, right? It's just like energy. You don't see energy, but that doesn't mean it's not real. So I always thought of like, because of my upbringing, to not really divulge many things like in public. Maybe close friends, close family and stuff. Yeah, but I don't do it because of the what I was told by my mother, and then also because now as an adult seeing that a lot of people out there don't really wish well for you. So why give them any fuel, right? You don't make the journey harder for yourself,
And again, it depends on the person, man. But I mean, essentially what you're saying is you have this goal, you have this frequency that you're putting into creation. And if you're exposing this frequency to others, the ability for that frequency to become polluted becomes greater, right? So,
Yep.
But it really just depends on, again, the person, because if you have somebody like, Mr. Brandon Carter, he loves all the haters. He actually uses all that fuel to push himself forward and do what he needs to do, and he'll often put like videos about like, this is my second workout for the day and here's a selfie for the haters, and I can see how that potentially could work, but I think Brandon's also a very unique individual, and for the vast majority of the population, especially those who are struggling, that's maybe not the best approach.
Yeah, he's a particularly different individual, and I guess it is a matter of what works for you. Me, I prefer to toil in silence, and then you just see. It is like when I first started to get into shape, no one really saw like the difference. And it was only like when it was in a exceptional shape, people were like, gosh damn, like what have you been doing? And
Right.
then it's similar to like I remember recently a girl that I used to talk to back in the day. She messaged me. She's like, "When did you wake up?" I was like, "Dude, I've been walking this path for years, right? Where have you been?" She says, "Like, I haven't heard from you in like 14 years. Like you were a completely different person." And that is like what I like in a sense, where you see the transformation, right? So there's why I tend to keep things to myself and toil away in silence, and then when I have the wins then you see them. But I am very much a person that like you don't see the hard work, but the hard work is there, and then occasionally you may show the hard work, but I'm not a person that kind of like Brandon. I mean, because everybody has a different style. He just puts it there to get more hate so that it can fuel him to be better. So everyone has a different sort of like fear that they can use to propel them. Me, that's not me, but for him, it works exceptionally for him.
Yeah, it does. It's really kind of crazy. But the funny thing is, I mean, again, this is a whole nother thing, but he talks to himself like that in his own head as well. Like he basically berates himself to fuel his own goals and drives, which, hey, if that's what works for you, that's cool. But you bring up something interesting, which is also something I talk about, is the influence of other people on your journey and how that can really change the game. And I think that's one of the most like simplest ways to accomplish anything you want to accomplish, whether that be business, career, relationships, or whatever. But in regards with fitness, I often tell people, hey, you want an easy hack to get in better shape? It's like, just get some fit friends, start hanging around people who have the health and the body that you want. And it's like, if you do that often enough, it's almost through osmosis, you're going to just start becoming healthier. And it's it's very practical. And the reasons why is just because they do active things. They probably go and eat at good places. And, but I think that it's something that's really important. And unfortunately, like-minded individuals hang out together. So it's not uncommon that if you're, say, very overweight, your family probably is not in the best health as well. And probably the people you hang around with isn't in the best health as well. So the cool thing too, though, is that I find that when people start to make positive change, it becomes infectious and it can affect everyone around them. So, I had a family I was working with at one point. I was working mainly with actually, I was only working with the husband, but he ended up losing a whole bunch of weight. He lost like 60 pounds or something like that. And his family started eating better. His wife started making better choices. His children saw what he was doing, and they were all kind of overweight, and they were all becoming healthier. And then at some point, his wife ended up becoming a client of mine like a year later. And it was really helping them all out, which I thought was amazing. And then at some other point, I ended up working with a mom and her 2 daughters, and I had all 3 of them as clients. And the same thing. One time she sent me her win, and she said, "My whole family is tracking macros," and I was like, "Oh, that's amazing." But again, I mean, I think that is something super important too, is when you're on this journey, like who you surround yourself with is going to have a pretty big impact on anything. So, if you decide you want to tell people your goals, like you're kind of saying, just be very careful who you tell those goals to, because if you tell that to, I know if I share something with you, Todd, you're going to be like, "That's great, man. Like, go for it. Do it. You're going to do amazing. Like, you got it." Right. But if I share it with somebody who's I might not know, or is just, in some kind of negative state, I might not get the same response. And that can potentially affect how I see my goal or myself, or my momentum.
Absolutely. And it would be because of the energy that you're receiving back. So this is why I always say you have to be very careful who you share things with, right? Because what I have learned is that the people that hurt you the most are the people that are actually closest to you, and not necessarily a total stranger. So you always have to be very careful on who you choose to share with, So we talked a little bit about mindset, and we touched a little bit about meditation. So how has meditation personally helped you on your journey from being overweight to ultimately being a coach to help people achieve their fitness goals? So how did meditation all come into all of this?
Ooh, I got the chills as you were asking that. Meditation is one of those, it's like a sneaky superstar. I don't know why that's the term that came into my consciousness right now, but I first came across meditation probably when I was like 17 or 18, and I don't remember where I came across the concept, and I just thought it was interesting. And I think the first time I tried it, I like fell asleep, right? Like, I think that maybe is common with most people. And actually, I think I remember now, maybe it wasn't the first time I came across it, but I was reading a book called The Finding of the Third Eye by Vera Adley Standler. I still remember that book. I still revisit it from time to time. Very amazing book. Talks a lot about all sorts of things, but meditation was mentioned in there. And I never really seriously tried it until probably 10 years later, as I started to really walk the fitness and spiritual path. And I think it was Edgar Casey who I started, he's probably one of the most influential people on my spiritual path to this day. And I mean, I'm literally studying his books still. Like, I was reading it this morning. And he is huge on meditation, and he views meditation as basically attunement to the divine, or at-one-ment, as he likes to call it. And basically, he sees it as a foundation of overall spirituality, fitness, health, like all of it. And that's kind of what got me interested and got me kind of started. And I've probably been doing it now for over 10 years. I was a little bit less consistent with it in the beginning, and for a long time I did it every day, maybe took weekends off, and like now I'm at the point where it's a daily practice. I try to do it for at least an hour every day. And it was one of those things where, like I said, initially, I don't think I really noticed a ton of change in myself personally. But the more that I started looking into the data, and I mean, there's a ton of scientific research on this, it eventually became something that I'm like, wow, there is so much information on this that shows so many improvements in every aspect of your life. It would be stupid of me not to do this. It was just like, okay, it's like eating well or breathing or whatever. It's like, I just need to make this something that I do. And yeah, I just at that point decided that I was going to make it a practice. And throughout that journey, I've gone on a couple of 10-day silent meditation retreats, Vipassana. I've tried different kinds of meditations, and they have all really, now looking back, I can definitely say that for me, it's improved my focus. It's improved my overall sense of peace, my mind-body connection, my relationship with God. It's made me more patient. It's allowed me to be more creative, intuitive, has given me a better sense of self-control, of awareness, of mindfulness. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but again, it's one of those things that it happens in bits. And I really found that it can be a very powerful tool for fat loss or accomplishing your goals, because it also puts you in a state where you're able to kind of downshift your brain activity. And at that point, you become very receptive and your subconscious becomes malleable, where you can now provide suggestions to it, which come in the forms of affirmations and or visualizations, where you can really do some great work. And this is kind of the process that I developed. In the book, I call it the Mindset Mastery MAV method, where it basically starts with, a period of meditation where you're just focusing on your breath. And then at that point, you're introducing your own created affirmations and then visualization. And it's something that I had been doing for a long time, and I just don't think I ever really realized that's kind of what I was doing. But the longer that I kept with it, I mean, I started noticing more fruit and changes in my life. And I'm like, man, this is such a game changer. And realized also that most of my clients needed it, because especially I tend to work with a lot of busy, professionals, high achiever kind of types. And they're stressed out. They're like super, super stressed out. And again, they have issues regulating their emotions. They might not be completely conscious and aware of the choices that they're making. They kind of tend to go off in autopilot mode because of the demands of, their life. So I was like, man, I need to get a lot of these guys to just, and women, to like slow down, chill out, and just center themselves. And the more that I've been kind of, helping people do this, I mean, I figured that I've seen that it definitely helps them on the journey to make better choices when it comes to what they're going to be eating. It improves their mind-muscle connection when they're working out. It allows them to, again, calm down, have less stress, which lowers cortisol, which, as you know, cortisol is a great contributor when it comes to fat loss, specifically in your abdomen area. And I mean, I can go on and on and on. There's just been a ton of benefits. And I really find that, I mean, again, not just for fat loss. I mean, I think if humanity in general were to start meditating, even if a short period of time every day, I mean, I think this whole world would change.
Yeah, I concur, because meditation has played a big part in my life in the last 5 years. And it's really helped me through all the challenges that I've had, because my life became extremely difficult 7.5 years ago. And if it weren't for meditation, I don't think I would be as sane as I am now. And this brings me on to a point that I wanted to ask you, because I got asked this question recently, but being that you wrote the book, I wanted to get your intake on it. So a lot of people say to me, well, Todd, you talk a lot about meditation, and me, I've been doing that, and I still haven't been able to achieve my fitness goals or my life goals. So, do you have any tips that you can share with people on how to hack that inner voice that you call the hater in your head?
Yeah. So, I mean, to touch on that, I think, first of all, it's important to realize that there's very few things in life that you're going to be able to implement that are really going to make a huge difference. The first thing that comes to mind for me is maybe like sleep. Like, if you go from somebody that only sleeps like 4 hours a night to all of a sudden sleeping 8 hours a night, your life will probably change. You're going to feel like a whole different person, right? But outside of that, I think there's a lot of practices that they're not always noticeable. So meaning, what I'm trying to say is, like, meditation is not going to overnight fix your entire life or allow you to accomplish your goals, outside of like how most things won't. or, you know, but I think to answer your question, do me a favor, can you rephrase?
Sure. So basically, like, I get people, because I talk a lot about meditation and on my channel and on my Instagram and stuff. And I get every now and then the question like, Todd, well, you talk all about this meditation thing, and I'm trying to do it, but I don't seem to be getting any progress. You know what I mean? I'm not seeing any differences or improvements and stuff. And I was just wondering, like, because you've been doing meditation longer than me,
Mm-hmm.
and you talk a lot more about it than I do on my channel. So, and you've done like retreats and everything like that. So I wanted to find out if there are like any tips that you can give people as to what may be the roadblock, what may be the things stopping them from actually achieving any sort of like improvement, whether it's in terms of mindset, achieving the fitness goal, achieving a life goal. Because like you said, meditation is not something that is a switch that happens overnight, but there has to be some little things that you can do that cumulatively can help to like supercharge mindset to improve, achieving your fitness goals, achieving your life goals, feeling better about yourself, overcoming and quelling that hater in your head, as you call it in your book.
So, I mean, this is a loaded question. I wanted to clarify to make sure that you were basically saying, I mean, I think there's multiple layers to this, but if I'm understanding you correctly, people are saying, "Hey, Todd, I'm starting to meditate and I'm still not accomplishing or moving forward," right? And again, I think what I said earlier is still applicable. Is like, hey, meditation is not going to solve all your problems or like, be the magic bullet. All necessarily. It could be for some people, but again, I think it's just that everybody's different. Everyone's approach is different, and I think the biggest thing that I could probably say to that is, if you can find a way to internalize that this is a holistic journey and that everything builds up upon everything builds on upon each other and it's all integrated, then it becomes a lot easier in a way because you're not looking for this one thing to be the driving factor to get you this other thing. So again, there's hundreds of, if not thousands of different ways to meditate. And depending on who you ask, I mean, you might even get a response like, the point of meditation is not to improve your life or to accomplish anything. It's like the practice has rewards in and of itself. It's just something that is, and it's kind of seen as something that's neutral. And like in Vipassana meditation, that's more probably along the lines of what do you get a response like that. Like the goal is not to have these altered mind states or to, experience anything. It's just to sit and to be. If you ask somebody who practices like transcendental meditation or something else, you might get a completely different response. But I think when it comes to fat loss, is again, it's part of the whole. It's like you meditate and you also work out and you also eat well and you also stay accountable and do the things that you need to do to get to your goal. But you have to look at it from an outside perspective as far as like, well, what's really happening that is stopping me from getting to my ultimate goal. So that's why having data is so important. We're talking about having a deadline, right? It's okay, cool. We have these actionable steps. Well, let's look at the plan. Am I keeping in alignment with what I said I was going to do? Am I losing a pound a week as I wanted to? Let me look at my calories. If I'm tracking my calories, cool. Now I have this data. And let's look at my workouts. Have I made increases? Am I progressively overloading? Are my weights going up? Are my reps going up? Stuff like that. And that's what's going to give you the answer to why you're not accomplishing your goals, right? Once in a while, and I'm sure you've seen this too, Todd, is you have clients who, by the book, they're doing everything perfectly, but things aren't shifting, and that's when you come across these more complicated, like genetic, biological, hormonal, weird things that kind of happen. And unfortunately, they're just, there's a different approach to that. But specifically to the meditation, it's a key, it's a tool, it's a gateway that can really propel you forward, because it will basically level up every other area of your routine or practice. So again, for example, if you're stressed out and that increased stress is causing you to make poor eating choices, or cause high cortisol, and it affects your sleep, if you start to, say, for example, meditate, and you are able to quiet the mind and regulate your emotions through that practice, then your cortisol levels are going to drop, your stress is going to go down, you're potentially going to start making better eating choices, and you're going to start sleeping better, which will hence improve the results that you're seeing as far as like the physical aspects of that, right? But I think the other aspect to that is to realize that, as with anything else, is with meditation, just like fat loss, the name of the game is consistency, and long-term consistency. You're not going to lose 30 pounds in 2 weeks. I mean, could you do it? Probably, but it's not going to be healthy, and you're more than likely going to put it all back on. So it's the same thing with meditation. When we often talk about meditating and it helping people out, yes, there are people that start meditating and maybe their first session or handful of sessions, it's like, whoa, that was amazing. Maybe they have an experience, maybe they find something that really benefits them. But I find that's really not the case. In my experience, that's not how it was. Like, maybe early on I had a few really interesting experiences, but for the longest time, I even went through pockets where I was like, why am I doing this? Like, is this even really helping me anymore? Like, I don't know if I necessarily even enjoy this, but I just kept doing it, because I was like, no, I know this is beneficial for me. I know what the data says. I can see, benefits, even though they're small, and keeping up with it now for over 10 years. I mean, now I'm at the point where, even literally, Todd, just this morning, I was taking a walk around the block and I was just like, man, I love this stuff. Like, I'm really grateful for my practice and the fact that I didn't give up on it, because now it's like water to my soul. It became an anchor point. It's something that just sets the tone for my day. It keeps me grounded. It keeps me level. And I noticed that how much it has done for me when I went on a trip this past summer to Europe. First couple of days I didn't meditate, we were busy and times or whatever schedules. And then finally I was like, hey, you know what? I need like at least 30 minutes. Just, I told people I was with, like, just give me some time. And I sat down and I meditated. And Todd, it was like I was drinking water for the first time. Like, I just felt so refreshed, and it quenched a thirst in me that I didn't even know was there. And then at that point I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is amazing. And I can't believe how much I need this now and how beneficial it has become for me. And I mean, I literally felt like a new man after I did that. But again, this was after a very, very long time of meditating. So I hope that answered your question, but what I really want to say is, like, stay with the practice, give it time, do it daily. I think that's really key, is having it be a daily thing, because that kind of sets the stage for the discipline and for the transformation to occur. More than likely, if I hear that meditation hasn't necessarily, quote unquote, worked or made any positive change in people's lives, because they have very sporadic and unbroken times of focus, right? They might try it for a week and then they stop, and then they try it for like a couple of days and then stop. But it's very rare that somebody tells me, like, oh, I've meditated for 30 days and hasn't received something. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah.
The response.
Yeah, it does, because I realize that seems to be the case when I look at it from myself as well, where first thing first, you have to realize that, like you said, it's a holistic thing. It isn't a magic bullet. It is one of the things that you do, because you are a mind, body, spirit complex. So you have to feed the mind as well. So I find that when I get comments like that, like when I had from that girl on Instagram, when I start to dig deeper, I find that it's similar to what you're saying, where the lack of consistency is one thing. And then also, like, people are thinking of it as like, oh, this, just if I just do this one thing, then that solves all of my problems. And then all the other things they're still doing that are causing self-sabotage. So it's like, instead of looking at it as a holistic growth, a holistic thing to do, it is more as like, oh, this is this magic pill. I'm going to swallow this pill and all of my weight loss is going to be gone and it's going to be achieved and my life is just going to get better. So yeah, and also not being consistent, because the thing is that meditation is very challenging because your mind is always racing. So to quieten the mind is actually a skill in itself, right?
Right. So that's kind of the thing I think people miss too when it comes to meditation is like, it's hard. And at first it sucks, and I sometimes have to remind myself, like I could barely sit still for a couple minutes, like and now it like blows my mind that I could pretty much have these really long sits and be fine. But initially, I mean, it's, and then that's the thing is like most people never spend time in silence alone with their thoughts. And if they do, it's a very scary place to be because as we spoke about earlier, inherently people are very negative. So just to really get into, and arguably the meditation doesn't really start until you at least get some semblance of being able to sit with yourself and at least be aware of the craziness of your own thoughts. And then eventually, if you can get to that place of stillness, I think that's when the game changes. But even just to get to that place of stillness, I mean, sometimes it takes people a very long time. I mean, for me, I'm the kind of guy that this thing never stops. Like it just loves to go on and on and on and on. And I was telling my buddy yesterday that I realized that most of the things that I enjoy in life, like really truly enjoy. So I'll give you an example. For me, like music. Absolutely, I love music. I'm a musician. I play guitar, and one of my favorite things to do in this world is to create and jam with people in the moment, on the fly. Creation to me is absolutely beautiful. Like one of my favorite things on this planet. And there's a few other things I really enjoy doing. But I realized that the reasons why I like to do those things, and for example, even my own addictions and struggles with alcohol and other drugs, was because it got me out of this. It allowed me to get out of my own head, and in many cases, such as music, forced me to be in the present moment. Right. So I think that's one of the most powerful things about meditation is getting into that stillness, getting into that present moment. But you need to allow yourself that time and that practice to be able to even get to that place, which, like I said, it just depends on the person. I mean, I've read experiences of people, like I said, first, second time they sit down and meditate, all of a sudden they're mini Buddhas, they're mini Zen monks, and they're just like meant for the practice. For me, that has not been the case. I was definitely not meant for it, at least at first. And here I am 10 years later now, where I'm like, yes, like now I need it, basically. Like it's become almost like a need, so yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Same for me. It is. I had one or two experiences in the beginning doing meditation that were very powerful, but then it was almost like I never was able to get back there, and I started to get frustrated because I couldn't stay in the state of meditation, and it took years. Like I think I started meditating in 2019. Yeah, so almost 5 years. I think it's going to be going 5 years. Actually, probably like 2-3 months. It'd be like 5 years. So yeah,
Oh
basically
wow,
5 years.
nice.
Yeah. I know, realize that. So
Yeah, I think that's the part too that again, it's just, there's so many different ways to meditate, and it really depends on your intention and what you see it on. Like at this point, I now view meditation probably a little differently than I did 5 or 6 years ago, or even when I first started. But for some people, it's trying to get the mind to quiet. It's being more mindful. It's being more present. And at this point, I view it as, like I said, kind of more of what Edgar Casey would call attunement or at-one-ment, or tuning in to the divine. As a musician, I love that concept. It's like we're sitting here to tune in to the divine. And I think when you're, again, it's important to realize, okay, well, what does this mean to me, and how am I going to set this as a priority and for what purpose, then it can really make a difference in what you're trying to accomplish. So, I mean, you can even temporarily change the way you meditate depending on what you're working on as far as your goals, right? So if you're going to go through a period, for example, that you have a lot of intense mental activity, you're going to be very busy, you have to be thinking a lot, then it might be beneficial for you to start to try to find that stillness in your meditation so you can free up those mental energies and that clutter for the work you're going to be doing in your daily life, for example. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think that this ties in really well to what I want to ask you, because you talk about visualization in your book. Now, I actually call it, when I talk to my clients, I call it mental visualization. So how do you see that it makes a big difference in terms of achieving goals? Because your mind is powerful, but this is what I call it, mental visualization, but you just call it visualization. So I guess maybe it might still be creating the picture in the mind. How does that tie in to actually achieving fat loss?
So, again, I do talk about kind of the neural principles and more of the quote unquote science behind it in the book. However, given the nature of this podcast, I think it's kind of worth going down the rabbit hole, and I would love to hear your opinion on it too. But if you think about the concept of somebody trying to, actually, I won't even take it. So I'm really torn with the whole manifestation thing, and I have been for years. And correct me if I'm wrong, Todd, but from what I gather, there's a big concept and principle of, especially in the spiritual community, of manifestation being something that you can create your own reality, and depending on how you focus your thoughts, emotions, and visualizations, that you can basically bring something into fruition in the material world. Is that about right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the problem with this is, again, it always kind of just felt off to me, because I think naturally, as egoic humans, we want to manifest all the carnal stuff. We want the money, we want the specific partner, we want the big house. We usually tend to want these things, right? It's very rare you ever hear somebody say, I'm going to manifest more love on this planet, right? It's usually always these things. And anyways, but I think it kind of ties in, is there is some aspect of it. There is some principle to it. Again, I'm taking from Casey here. He likes to say, spirit is a life, mind is a builder, physical is a result. So as with the concept of mind as a builder, when you're visualizing something, you're actually using your mental energies and creative energies to create that within the thought realm, or the ether, whatever you want to call it. And as you tend to rehearse that image and give it form, it becomes clearer and easier to achieve. Hence, you're almost in a way manifesting your goals or your desired physique in the 3D world. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And what I would say is that, to piggyback on that, what I have learned through my journey is that it all comes down to your subconscious beliefs about yourself. And the thing is that what a lot of people don't realize is that these thoughts and beliefs are very, very deep, and they almost always come from your childhood. Now, this is one of the reasons why I am a big, big, big advocate for psychedelics. And the reason for that is that meditation, absolutely great. Breath work, fantastic. But for me, because I'm a very stubborn guy, I have to be placed in the situation, in a ceremony, where I have zero control, and the medicine, because that's what it is, the medicine literally shows me, but these are your fears and traumas. And I have never had an experience with psychedelics where I met like entities or beings or stuff. For me personally, I've done several ceremonies. It was always showing me in my life, the areas that I had to work on, the areas that are weak, the false beliefs about myself, and also where these things came from, right? So I say all that to say that what have found is that it is so deep in your subconscious that you almost don't even realize it is there. And this is akin to you having a pebble in your shoe, a little stone in your shoe. In the beginning, it's very uncomfortable, but you walk maybe a mile with that thing in your shoe, that discomfort disappears and it just blends into your foot as like normal. And you need something to break the connection between the pebble, the shoe, and your foot for you to realize, hold on a minute, I've got a pebble in my shoe here. Oh gosh, this is why my foot has been hurting me. But you forget that your foot is hurting you because the pebble is in the shoe, but you're only focused on the foot being hurting. So you think, oh, maybe just rest my foot a little bit, put up my foot a little bit. These are all just band-aids for the foot hurting. The foot hurting is because you have a pebble in your shoe, a little stone. And this is akin to how the fears, traumas, and negative beliefs are in our subconscious. It is so deep that you forget it's there. It just disappears. So in your conscious mind, it doesn't exist. No meditation, breath work, and psychedelics bring those beliefs to the front. Now, for some people like me, yes, meditation, because I've done so many psychedelics, that my chakras are so much cleaner, that meditation does help me a lot now. But I had so much negative energy and beliefs to get rid of that I had to go the psychedelic route. Now, other people may do breath work. Other people may be the total meditation type. But I always say, look, life is about options, and I'm a big believer in options. And I think psychedelics, perfect way to go, you know? So I have found that is, I say all that to say that is, it comes from your subconscious and extremely deep in your subconscious, and mostly from the ages of like, say, 5 to like 10, you had an experience in your childhood that significantly created this belief system about yourself. And you have to get back present to that actual event to heal the fear or the trauma or the pain. I give a quick example that this may sound mad, right? But I remember I did a ceremony with a lady. And in the end, she said that she saw why she has had a fraught relationship with men. And what happened is that her dad forgot to pick her up from school because he had a really high level job and he was really busy. And in her head, she told herself that her dad didn't love her. So that belief system transferred to all of her relationships with men. So she would always run away from men and break relationships because of the belief that the men didn't love her. So what happened is that when she took the medicine, she saw that it came specifically from that point. And it's not that her father didn't love her. He just simply forgot because he was so busy with his job, right? And the thing is that she never got to tell him that, or to like say, well, Dad, this is what happened, and the father could actually ask for forgiveness. So because he had passed, there was no way for her to clear up that energy. So she actually had to like forgive herself for creating that image in her head, because she did acknowledge that her father treated her really well, did all kind of things. He was there for her. But just that one time, that one instance created a whole belief system. So I say all that to say that in our childhood, just that one thing that is like the little pebble in the shoe can be a total like game changer in how you act, you react, you think, and believe, you know?
Oh, definitely. And tying it back to this whole meditation thing, I mean, I think that's why, and visualization is it becomes a tool, because when you're able to downshift your brain activity to the point where you're more receptive, you can literally start to rewire your subconscious. Hence why I give the quote unquote formula for including affirmations and visualization at the end of your meditation session, because now you can get into that deeper area. So when you form the visualization, you're literally hardwiring a compass, a direction of what it is that you want to create into your subconscious, into your psyche, so that you can move forward and accomplish that goal. And I think that's really why it becomes so powerful, especially within the context of meditation. Obviously, you can visualize just outside and do do it normally or separate it from it. But what I'm most excited about is that sequence that I talk about in the book, because I feel that it really will set you up for success, and it ties in all these principles in a way that you can do them all in one shot. Because as far as in my experience, usually they're dealt with separately, right? And you might find yourself affirming in the middle of the day or as you're driving, and that's cool too, and it works. But when you're affirming and you're in a place where your brain is, again, like I said, in these lower brain waves where it can sink in this information and allow the mind to be influenced by that, I think it really becomes a game changer.
Yeah, it really does. And, even though your book is a short book, it's a really good book. I like it because what you've done is you've put on paper what I talk about verbally. And ultimately, you led to my favorite topic I love to talk about, which is spirituality, right? And what you've done is that you've laid out basically how, and this is what I talk a lot on my show and on other podcasts, how getting in shape isn't just about getting into shape. It's about getting your mind into shape, because you actually have to change your mindset in order to get into shape. And then what happens is that when those two get married, quote unquote, then you end up finding the spiritual side of you. Because the way I describe it is that when you start to do exercise, you automatically start vibrating at a higher level. And then now when you get your mind right, and then you're doing practices like meditation, you are more open to receiving information from the universe or from source through the portals that you're opening in yourself. And you ultimately finished off the book going down the spiritual path. So, like, I wanted to find out, do you sort of like, because I am very much where with my clients, I don't even sugarcoat it. I talk about spirituality from day one. I talk about spirituality on my Instagram. And do you sort of like segue it bit by bit, or you package it all together and then give it to your clients? I'm interested because my approach is completely different.
No, that's great. I'm glad you're really direct with that. So, I mean, up until now, so I'm literally in the transitional phase right now where I'm launching a new program that really is encompassing of this whole thing. I mean, and now I'm packaging as a holistic program, mind, body, and soul. And the whole premise of it is that we're using fitness as a gateway into a spiritual journey or spiritual growth, right? And in this case, yes, it's going to be a much more encompassing package where we will kind of deal with this stuff pretty much early on. But I do find that, at least with my current clientele and previous clients, like some people are obviously, as you know, are very open and receptive to this kind of stuff, and then others not so much, right? And that's kind of where I'm looking for now. I think just because of where I am in my journey and my desire is, and because where I was for a long time too, is I'm looking for those people that, maybe they've already achieved some kind of success in their life. Maybe they're hardworking individuals and high achievers or whatever, but they just know like something's missing, and maybe they have some idea of spirituality, or they've, done some kind of work there, but it's still not something that's a part of their lives. And so that's really where I'm kind of trying to help people, is make that bridge or gap that bridge between, a truly holistic life, right? It's like, okay, cool. Let me, how do I apply the traits and abilities that got me successful into now working on my health and also working on my soul, and do that in a way where it's integrative and balanced, because as you know, depending on where the person's at, like, you just can't start speaking to them about all these really high level spiritual concepts when their main concern for the past 30 years has been putting food on the table or trying to scale the corporate ladder or whatever it is that they've been doing, you know? And I think that for me, I was at one point somewhere in that area where it's like I didn't know how to even really get started, or where I lied, or what I actually truly believed, and things like that. So it's like, okay, cool. But what you can understand is the body, right? I think this is why it's so powerful when you start to view the fitness journey in this way, is like, because the body is very obviously physical. It's like, it's here, it's tangible, you can touch it, you can experience pain and pleasure and all these things. So if you use that as like the catalyst, or the what do you call it, the parallel to how that looks like on the spiritual path, you have a very real world example, and it can help you at least make those connections and bridge that gap. And so yeah, again, it's not, you know, right now, again, I'm in this weird transition where like most of my clientele I'm starting to talk to about like, hey, I'm gonna start doing different things, and we're gonna have a couple of tools to help you, you know, manage your stress and do all this stuff. But it's also trying to really meet them where they're at, and I think that's really where the discernment and the art form lies, at least for me, and probably for you too. Is like, okay, where is this person at currently, and how can I best communicate with them to allow them to accomplish their goals and just grow? Because as you very much know too, at least in my experience, like, you know, the spiritual talk can be a big turnoff to some people, and then it causes all sorts of blockages moving forward. And as you spoke earlier, which a lot of them unfortunately are tied into their childhood and how they grew up and how their initial experience with religion or spirituality was when they first were coming up.
Yeah, this is why I'm really happy to talk to you today. And again, people, for those on video, this is the book, The Inner Game of Fat Loss by Adrian Hernandez. So Adrian, tell the people where they can find you if this message resonated with them and they want to, get to know you, get to join your program, get into shape, work with you. Tell them where they can find you, and also plug your book and tell them where they can find it and stuff like.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, so sleepinggiantsfitness.com. The new website is launched, or we're pending a video, but you can find me there. You can also go to my Instagram, Sleeping Giants Fitness, over on IG. Same thing with TikTok and on Facebook as well. As far as the book, it is available on Amazon. You can type in The Inner Game of Fat Loss on Amazon, and you can find that there. There's a paperback copy, and I think the digital copy is only $333. And like I said, if you want any of this information, or you want the goal setting workbook that I've created, I'll give that to you absolutely for free. Just go ahead and shoot me a message over on Instagram, and I'll make sure to get that for you.
Yep, this is the book here. It's not a very long book, so you don't have to think you've spent hours to read it, but it's a very good book. It's very succinct, and you set out a very detailed plan, because it's very interesting where you ended up and where you started. So
and thanks for that. I mean,
book.
That was my goal, is to keep it short and acceptable and readable for the average person. And, again, ultimately, I believe that the holistic path on, especially when it comes to fat loss, is really the goal, and exploring some of these deeper concepts, especially who you are as a soul and your spirituality, is really important. But that's kind of the precursor of this book into, I guess, probably another book I'm going to be writing that really ties everything together. But you can use anything as a catalyst to really get tuned into who you are and your connection with God, source, whatever you want to call it. But I believe as humans, I mean, that's really why we're here. And to be able to get there by any kind of medium, especially something as worthwhile as like losing weight, is a no-brainer. But whether you can find God like trading stocks, or like whatever it is that you do. So I guess that's really just my encouragement, is ultimately that people would really resonate within themselves and find out their true purpose and be balanced and healthy and whole and full of love, mind, body, and soul. And if I can help get you there in any shape or form whatsoever, then that makes me very happy, and it's an honor to be able to do that.
Yeah, and if you write yet the next book, just let me know. We'll have you back on the show. We'll talk a little bit about that as well and delve into it because, you know, I talk about this stuff every day, and I've been talking about it for, I think, because you and I were friends when I made the transition from just purely fitness into this genre of information, you know, and I just went hard. I just went all in, to be honest with you. So yeah, man, I'm really honored and happy to have you here on the show, Adrian. And for those who listen to the show, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share. And also, I'm a fitness trainer as well, as you know. So if you want to get into fantastic shape and you want some help improving your mindset and also learning some of the other things we talk about on our other shows, hit me up on Instagram at Adriano_246 or my name, Todd Cave, on Facebook. And as you see, I have on the merch today, Todd and Me shirt. So link will be in the bio of this podcast, where you can go to my Amazon store and support this podcast. And also, as I said before, you know, we talk about spirituality a lot. And if you want help on your spiritual journey and you want to help remove some of your fears and traumas and get back to your inner child, and as we said, these things come from your childhood, hit me up again on my Instagram at Adriano_246, and I'll help you to get some magic mushrooms. So once again, Adrian, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Many thanks for coming on to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. And we have some more interesting guests coming. So stay tuned, and thanks for listening.